Hello, young scholars and families. My name is Miss Kay, and I am a youth paraeducator at the Ypsilanti District Library in Superior Township in Michigan, Ypsilanti. You may have seen me. I hope that we have had the joy of meeting. And I also work for Ypsilanti Community Schools at Erickson doing a reading program during lunchtime called The Lunch Bunch. Today, we are going to read More Than Just a Game: The Black Origins of Basketball. This book is written by somebody, Madison Moore, and the pictures are by Lonnie Olivier, Olivier, I think, who is based out of Atlanta. It says, how did black basketball players come to dominate the sport? They earned it, played for it, and made it their game. It says, on cracked blacktops and driveways, on laminated floors and echoing gyms, and on NBA courts across the United States, black and brown skin shine, sweaty, and pushing toward that next crisp swoosh. Oh, you catch the little girl hanging out with probably one of her older brothers or uncles. More than 70% of current players in the National Basketball Association, aka the NBA, are black, crossing and juking, laughing and panting in the country's biggest arenas. But how did they get the chance to step onto that stage? They earned it, played for it, made it their game. When basketball was invented, not everyone was welcome on the court. In 1891, in Springfield, Massachusetts, James Naismith hung a peach basket in a YMCA gym, grabbed a soccer ball, and posted 13 rules on the wall. The sport spread like wildfire. Basketball was fun and easy to learn, but lots of people didn't get the chance to join in. It was uncommon at this time for girls to play any sports at all. The game moved through segregated YMCAs and privileged colleges, evolving and changing in spaces that black Americans were not widely allowed to go. Segregated means separate. So that means at that time, black people were not allowed to go in spaces where white people were. So they made their own spaces. So since black people were not allowed to go the places that white people did, they made their own spaces. In 1904, Edwin Bancroft Henderson, a black gym teacher in Washington, D.C., learned the game at an open Harvard summer course for teachers. He brought it back to his city. He taught his students to dribble and dish, float and shoot. The students took it to their neighborhoods, crossed over cousins and brothers, feet pounding on cement. And if you look closely, you don't see any tennis shoes yet. They have on dress shirts, pants. This was 1904. They dress very different now. Still, basketball couldn't catch like wildfire for black players no matter how much they liked the sport. When winter hit or schools closed, there was no place to play. But the early 1900s were bringing on a black cultural revolution, and it was the perfect chance for the love of basketball to take root, spread deep, and flourish. Early vinyl records were making black musical styles like jazz, ragtime, and blues popular across the country. New dance halls and ballrooms opened for black musicians to perform, drawing swaying and swinging crowds. Because remember, they weren't allowed to go to the places where white people danced and swayed, so they created their own. Basketball supporters in cities like New York and Chicago saw an opportunity in these musical spaces. They made deals with the owners of the dance halls. A few hours before musicians arrived to take the stage, players showed up to hoop. Crowds switched from alley oops to 8 count steps, all at the drop of a beat. Through this marriage of basketball and dance, the sport was becoming more than just a game. Crowds socialized as they watched and cheered on each glorious game. Both old and young were on their feet and moving, uplifted and united by basketball. In the 1910s and 1920s, black teams started to organize. Churches, park districts, youth organizations, and community centers all across the country hosted leagues and tournaments that grew more and more competitive. Teams from historically black colleges traveled long distances to play one another. White colleges had been competing against one another for many years, and white professional club teams existed in most major cities. But now, black teams were rising to meet them on the court, ready to shake up 30 years of segregated playing. These teams were known as the Black Fives, all black club teams that put 5 men on the court to take the ball from fingertip to net, to break ankles, to shoot, score, and win. In Pittsburgh, the Monticello Athletic Association was home to Cumberland Posey, widely accepted as the best black player of the Black Fives generation. In Chicago, the Savoy Big Five drew crowds to the Southside Savoy Ballroom, building on the history of basketball and dance to bring more people to the sport. A few years later, they split into two, forming a new team called the Harlem Globetrotters, the original namesake of the modern day exhibition team. In New York, the Renaissance, often called the Wrens, won 2,588 of 3,117 games across 25 years, an unmatched winning rate of 83%. These teams brought black excellence to a new scale. Though not many people today know the names of the black players of the 1920s and 1930s, anyone who cared about basketball in that time had to recognize the skills of these self-made black players. That might be something interesting to look up for a report for Black History Month. The Black Fives. Basketball still didn't have one standard league across the country, but the Black Fives played against one another and against some all white teams in different games and tournaments. Still, many tournaments remained completely closed off to black teams, and teams that had both black and white players were extremely rare. Then, in 1939, an annual tournament called the World Championship of Professional Basketball began. Despite the large number of successful Black Fives teams, the first selection committee only invited two black teams to compete. But these teams have been beating the odds for decades. One decade is 10 years. So decades means they had did it for more than like 10 or 20 years. In a landmark victory in a stadium packed with white fans, the Wrens, led by tournament MVP Clarence Puggy Bell, defeated the all-white Oshkosh All-Stars and claimed the first ever professional basketball world championship. Now we got tennis shoes on. In 1940, the Harlem Globetrotters took home the title in a one-shot lead victory. In 1943, the Washington Bears rose to the top in a double-digit win. Black players were proving over and over again that basketball was their sport. They wouldn't be left out. They couldn't be overlooked. The NBA officially formed in 1949, and within 1 year it transitioned into an integrated league, recognizing that the only way forward for men's basketball was to include everyone. This was a victory, but still not for all. Players from the Black Fives era were widely left out of basketball's Hall of Fame. Black coaches and owners were excluded from managing the new NBA teams. The Black Fives faded from the history of the sport. The name Cumberland Posey may have been forgotten, but without him, there would be no Michael Jordan. Without Puggy Bell, we'd have no LeBron James. The Black Fives made the sport we celebrate today and used it to change their communities. Basketball's uniquely black history echoes in the squeak of each sneaker and the cheers of each fan, inspiring a new wave of dreams and determination in the hands of each player that picks up a ball today. And at the back, they have some illustrated pictures and also, let me see if I can get this close, some pictures of some of the original Black Fives that played during the 1920s and 1930s. Zachary Clayton, Cumberland Posey, Clarence Puggy Bell, Bill Russell, who played for the Boston Celtics, basketball greats, player profiles. And that was more than just a game. The Black origins of basketball. I hope you enjoyed it. Be well.